for monitor walls. They're very good, but not to the same level of accuracy that we have in the master monitor. And then we have what we call general viewing. Monitors that are good enough, they present very good colorimetry, accuracy, but are much less expensive than the other monitors. About a year and a half ago, we introduced, let me get my laser pointer here. We introduced a very esoteric monitor, which is the HX3110, which you will see later on. We have this monitor here. This is the first monitor in the industry with 4,000 nits on a commercial basis, and it has a number of features that I will describe in a minute. What used to be the default mode, the de facto monitor in post-production, the 310, we continue to sell it. We just lowered the price to make it more accessible. And about 4 weeks ago, we introduced a very small monitor that I have here, which shares the same technologies of the mastering monitors. This will be for OB trucks and on-set grading, and I'll discuss that monitor later on. Then the other monitors are, as I said, more for broadcasting applications, for studios, for client viewing capability. This is the 310. We call it the HX310. It says, we call it close 31-inch display, true 4K. This is 4096 by 2160 in terms of resolution. It has extremely accurate color gamut and resolution, and capable of reaching 4,000 nits in 10% window. If you open the window to 20%, the brightness drops to 2,000. If you have the full field, the full screen is 1,000 nits. Extreme levels of black reproduction, very wide viewing angle, and also has some interfacing technologies that are very unique. I'll tell you in a minute. Then it's very interesting that a lot of the material that people have been watching for the last 10 years, they don't know they have been missing a lot. Now they realize that what the camera is capturing is much beyond 1,000 nits in brightness. Okay, well, this is the device. All of the Sony monitors comply very exactly to the same chromaticity coordinates. The color gamut is exact across all of the monitors, so that what you use in the field matches what is used in post-production. This, again, this device is 4,000 nits. We achieve really extreme levels of blackness, 0.001 nits of blackness, using something I'm going to tell you in a minute. It has a number of licenses for very fast response to examine the video. It has an HDR engine inside the monitor, so that you can do HDR to SDR conversion using the device. And it's the first monitor in the industry that has IP interfaces in the back, standard. Then you can bring signals using 2110 standard directly into the monitor. And here you see the number of licenses, high dynamic range conversion, JPEG access. If you are a truck operator, you can bring from the stadium to the post-production house directly with JPEG access compression. The monitor will do the decompression on the fly. Okay, how does it work? It uses a technology called dual layer LCD. Short is dual cell. We have a very high power LED panel in the back and a number of optical filters in the middle. And we have 2 layers of LCD extremely well positioned. One is a black and white layer, and the other one is a color layer. Therefore, we have 2 layers of 4096 and 2160 precisely aligned, so that the black and white layer stops the light, and whatever scene it lets go through, it activates the color layer. Therefore, you can think about this is a pixel by pixel modulation of light, so that one pixel can be extreme bright, and the other pixel can be extreme black. It's that something that only OLED, the RGB OLED that we used to make in the past, could achieve. And now we can achieve that using this methodology. Okay? And we also add some anti-reflection layer, and I'll talk about more of that later. As I said, all of these monitors comply exactly to the same chromaticity coordinates so that all of them match in color precisely, whether it's a very inexpensive display or the flagship monitors, all of them look exactly the same. Why do we need to go to 4,000 nits? Well, as I said, cameras are now capturing a lot more than just 1,000 nits. We have been forced during the last 10 years to sort of create an environment of 1,000 nits, but now we have a much wider dynamic range canvas to color grade in the highlights and the chrominance also in the highlights. Fast response. Pixels have a response which is native to the panel. And sometimes the color grader doesn't know whether, if you see something blurry in the movie or in the video, you don't know whether it's the movie that has been poorly shot or it's the panel that is not reacting fast enough. Therefore, this panel, this display, has black insertion at very fast speed in order to clean up the act of the pixels so that you can eliminate the blurriness of that video. And assess, if you cannot, then definitely the mistake is in the movie. But for the most part, the blurriness comes from the weaknesses of the display technology. We sort of balance between brightness and fast response. The so-called general is 60 Hertz, faster is 90 Hertz blinking, fastest is 120 Hertz blinking. Then at 60 Hertz, the monitors can be 4,000 nits, can be 2,000 nits, can be 1,000 nits. You select whatever brightness is suitable to your viewing condition. If you have the license for fast response and you move it to a medium speed, 90 Hertz black insertion, the monitor can only reach 2,000 nits or 1,000 nits. If you want the fastest black insertion, the monitor will only reach 1,000 nits. Okay. The other thing that we introduced in this monitor is an FPGA, field programmable gauge array, that we use as an engine for high dynamic range processing. Then we can bring an HDR signal into the monitor, and you can select different ways to produce an SDR output. Remember that today we pay our bills using SDR programming. You may be producing a master in high dynamic range, but you, for the most part, you are airing, you are distributing SDR to the masses, whether it's OTT or over the air. Therefore, this conversion of HDR to SDR has to be done very, very well, very carefully. Then these monitors have 4 quadrants of 1920, 1080. And you can have a quadrant on the source HDR, another quadrant being the SDR resulting of the conversion, and the rest of the quadrant, waveform monitors, vector scopes, color gamut displays corresponding to this conversion. The back of the monitor, we have an output called EMO, Enhanced Monitor Output, which is where you export to the outside world the result of that conversion. We have 3 ways of doing the conversion, depending on where you are in the industry. We can have lots. Here in Los Angeles, in the movie production community, people like lookup tables. Therefore, you are baking the look of that high dynamic range capture, and this monitor can store up to 30 lookup tables. And you have your preferred look that you are going to burn on that video. And that output with the look will be exported through the back of the monitor. Another way is doing automatic conversion of HDR to SDR, and you can program the parameters of that conversion according to your artistic intent. And the third way is something very exact. The Sony cameras, the studio cameras, produce about 26 parameters every frame, describing the settings of the studio cameras. If you open the iris, if you change the exposure, if you change the color, all of those settings are transported every vertical blanking, every frame, to the outside world over SDI. Those 26 parameters that describe the camera can be now connected to the monitor, and the monitor will take an HDR signal and replicate an SDR equivalent to the output of the CCU of the camera. Why are we doing this? Well, because remember that the most important things in the trucks, in the production, is make sure that that SDR that you are producing is not destroyed, not affected in any way, because that's what you're gonna be archiving and airing. Therefore, the monitor will allow the technical director in the truck to validate that that production is truly equivalent to what the cameras are looking at. Then these are the three processes that these monitors have using a license. Then again, one is the automatic conversion, and you program the monitor to do the conversion according to your artistic intent. And we have a storage for 10 presets. You may have 10 different technical directors, one for football, one for baseball, one for basketball. Each one will convert HDR to SDR according to their artistic intent. These parameters can be stored in the monitor. The lot is probably this will be mostly for on-set behavior or people doing easy way conversion rather than just programming the monitor, which can be laborious. You just, you borrow a BBC lot or an NBC lot or a Sony lot, and you store it in the monitor, and the monitor will do the conversion for you. And the other one is, this is mostly used in Europe. I haven't seen anything in North America doing this. In Europe, most of the trucks with Sony cameras will output these 26 parameters that I mentioned, and the monitors are connected to the behavior, to the look of the cameras automatically. Once again, the monitors have these 4 quadrants, and you can have your source in one quadrant, you can have HLG in another one, S-Log3 in another one, PQ, and you can examine how to color grade the different pictures. This is the enhanced monitor output that I mentioned before. This is where the signal that once it is processed, it goes out. Of course, it has 12G, 3G SDI, and so on. The licenses vary in price. The only thing you need is to output the look of your video, then it's the cheapest license. If you want to do some conversion, let's say you're bringing 1080p and you want to convert to 1080i, or you're bringing 4K and you want to export 1080i, you can have another license. If you want to have all the tools, that's the most expensive license. It will have 4K to HD down conversion, HDR conversion, etc. Okay, and we also have, as I said, another license for JPEG access, because JPEG access is necessary for IP communication. Most companies are now transferring over IP from the stadium to the broadcast center over 2110, and the JPEG access compressed video is coming. The monitor will allow you to do the compression on the fly. And here you see, you have the 2 connectors in the back, which as you know, you have the red and the blue networks for hitless failover. It complies exactly with every parameter of the SMPTE 2110 interface, and you can see all of the characteristics here, 2110-20, 21, 22, all of these different variants of the encapsulation of data over 2110 are supported in the monitor. hitless failover. If one network fails, it switches instantly to the other network. It has a precision time protocol for locking the monitor to the network of the clock of the network. Discovery, NMOS ISO 4 and ISO 5, super important to be able to control the monitor remotely. In your workstation, you will see all of the monitors independent of where they are geographically, because they are discovered by the 2160 environment. Very multiple graphics of a waveform monitors, vector scopes, color gamut displays are all built into the display. Also, we can set up the IP communication directly on the monitor, a very wide viewing angle, and a very interesting material that we discovered a number of years ago. This is an anti-reflection material that prevents basically any reflection, any light impinging on the display. Therefore, it gives the illusion that the blacks are deeper black because there is no reflection of external light. And compared to other material that we exist today, is more effective. Okay, that was the mastering monitor. It's been in the market for 2 years. Mostly people that are buying it is in the studios and post-production. But the broadcasting community, the trucking people, the on-set people have been asking for a smaller unit that we can place in perhaps DIT cards, in racks, definitely is very important. Then we introduced about 3 weeks ago, we showed an early prototype, which is the one that you see here. I got this from Amsterdam, directly from Amsterdam. Is probably 1 or 2 of these early prototypes in the world. It will become available in the spring of next year. It is exactly the same technology that I just described for the big one, but in a small size. This unit, even though right now it's functioning at 4,000 nits, when it finally hits the streets, it will be 3,000. 3,000 nits in 10%, 1,500 nits in 20% window, 700 nits in full screen. Why? Well, because camera shading is usually a very dark environment in the trucks, and 4,000 nits is going to create a lot of issues for the operator. But other than that, the monitor is identical. It's not 4096, it's actually UHD, 3840 by 2160. And we have 2 models. One, the 1710 without IP connection, only SDI and HDMI. The other one, the 1710N, has IP interconnection. Therefore, we separate 2 models, different pricing. But other than that, is identical. Output precision is 12-bit. Internal numerical accuracy is beyond 24 bits. The pixel drivers are 10 bits. Okay. And once again, fully compliant to the color matching, the same chromaticity coordinate that we have across all of the Sony products. The licenses corresponding to these monitors, but because it's a small size, we don't have the control buttons that we have in the bigger monitor. Therefore, we have a control panel that you see here, and this control panel can control up to 32 monitors. Therefore, in a truck, probably you only need one controller in the truck to control everything. Okay. We are also recommending in the presentations that we've been doing lately, a different display technology for client viewing, because of course the colorist is viewing this at very close proximity, but the producer or the technical director or the owner of the movie wants to see it in a big screen. And the display technology that we are promoting is called QD OLED, quantum dot OLED. Specifically, it's a consumer technology that you can buy in in commercial stores. The model number is A95L, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. These monitors have a special mode of operation. Of course, you have vivid, cinema, sports, but there is a mode of operation called professional. When you select professional, the chromaticity point of this display are identical to the 3110. Therefore, this monitor matches very, very closely the look of the professional display. Okay, as you may know, SDR is defined to be about 100 nits, 8 bits. We have had that for 50 years. And since probably about 5 to 8 years ago, we've been promoting the use of very high brightness displays. Therefore, people talk about my display is 1,000 nit, my display is 2,000 nit. But the issue is that if you don't change the gamma or the transfer function that the video has to go through in the display, you're just simply bringing up, you're clipping the brights, you can improve the blacks a little bit, but you're not doing anything to improve the tones of that video. Therefore, what HDR brings to the table is to have a different kind of gammas. And I'll go into more details later on, but then probably since about 6 years ago, all consumer displays you can select now, 709 gammas, HLG, Dolby Vision. You have a number of gammas in order to bring up a much wider dynamic range in the display. Okay? We're gonna go into more detail later, but just to continue here, there are 3 gammas that you see popular in displays. One is the 709. Every display has to have 709. The other one is HLG, hybrid low gamma, which is relative. In other words, the video scales up in brightness depending on the brightness of the display. Therefore, if you shot your movie or your video at 700 nits in the field, and you have a Samsung display at home with 2000 nits, the video scales up automatically. You don't lose any information of the original video in the display. The other gamma is called PQ, perceptual quantizer, which is part of the Dolby Vision protocol. That is absolute. It's not relative. It was designed to go from 0 to 10,000 nits, and it doesn't scale. If your display is chopping at 1,000 and your video had more than 1,000, that content disappears. Therefore, each one of these gammas have pluses and minuses, okay? Okay. Because now a lot more content is coming into your home TVs, consumer TVs, now manufacturers have to pay attention to how you're going to map that high dynamic range into your TVs, trying to preserve the creative intent of the movie director, for example. Then a movie director may have 16 stops of dynamic range in your cinema camera, and you want to preserve as much as possible, but your TV doesn't handle it. Then what we do is we create a roll-off. We maintain as much as possible the tones and the characteristics of the majority of that video, and the highlights, we start rounding them, grading them, so that we can maintain some visibility of the highlight without clipping them. Professional monitors or mastering monitors do not do that. They clip. Why? Well, because colorists want to see exactly, they don't want to see any distortions prior to the clipping point. They want to see everything the video has, because you are coloring, you're creating the final piece of the movie. Therefore, roll-off do not happen in professional monitors, only happens in consumer displays. But you have to be very careful how you do that roll-off, because if your roll-off is too soon, you start losing important information in the midtones. Therefore, different manufacturers, LG, Samsung, Sony, TCL, Hisense, each one has their own expertise in how to do that. And we've had a very long history of expertise in video, and we are very cognizant about this. What is the maximum level that the display has? When are we going to put the onset of the knee, the beginning of the roll-off? This is very important in order to maintain the majority of the creative intent. But it's not only luminance and brightness, it's colors. What about if you're shooting a movie beyond P3? And then you have to compress that into 709. The color axis of P3 and 709 are very different. If you do it wrongly, you're going to produce a shift in the hue. Then you need to know how to compress that wider gamut into a smaller gamut, preserving the hues and simply desaturating the color accordingly. Therefore, the point is how to map the entire volume of capture into whatever the display of the monitor that is able to do. Okay? Then some people say, well, don't worry about it. I just put Dolby Vision and the monitor will just follow the Dolby Vision. It's not quite like that. There's a lot of information in the original video that is manipulated during the mastering of the movie in the professional monitor. And that video stream contains a lot of information. Yes, maybe a Dolby Vision stream carries a lot of that information, but you need to be cognizant of how that display works. And an LG display is very different than a Sony display or a Samsung display. Therefore, you need to have knowledge of the panel architecture. And we have analyzers built into the consumer displays that analyze every frame of the video coming in real time to produce a dynamic metadata analysis of that video. And with that information, we can paint that video into the characteristics of the display. Okay? If the TV is a high-level TV that you pay more money, the TV can do it by itself. But if you have a lower-tier TV, you may need external help, let's say from Dolby or other dynamic metadata. Therefore, to make a consumer TV accurate is not an easy job. It is quite complex. It's a lot of challenges. And now manufacturers, such as Sony, we are seeing an opportunity to bring consumer displays into professional environments, because the professional environments need now more larger sizes displays. Sony has been, since 1997, producing different engines inside our consumer sets, each one with better signal processing, more knowledge of the video signals, and so on. We were from a standard definition to high definition and 4K, high dynamic range. But about 2 years ago, Sony decided to create a very drastic change in processing. This was the beginning of AI. Then we call it a cognitive processing of the video. We are analyzing the video from the perspective of how a human would see that video. All of those algorithms are in a chip that we have in our consumer displays. It's called the Sony XR. And this processor analyzes every frame, segments the video, recognizes faces, skeleton tracking, shapes. We have a gigantic database of shapes inside that chip to produce an analysis of that video frame. And then we'll use that information to map the video into the panel of the display. Therefore, internal to as you know, the Sony consumer set are called Bravia, we have an internal metadata system based on a signal analyzer that is built in. Very heavy-duty CPU inside our TV sets. And then eventually, we drive the panel of the display. We have LCD displays, we have QD OLED displays, we have OLED displays, and so on. Therefore, this allows us to map almost perfectly to whatever is the panel technology that we are driving that video into. In the area of OLED, you may know, some of you may have used this. Sony created a display about 15 years ago, 14 years ago, called the X300. That was the only display in the world that had RGB OLED. And it very quickly became a de facto standard in movie production and post-production. The color volume was intact from absolute blackness to maximum brightness. The volume was constant color. And then LG created something called white OLED, WOLED. And about 2 years ago, Samsung introduced a technology called QD OLED, quantum dot OLED, using a blue particle OLED. And let me give you more details. The issue with white OLED is that in reality, every pixel is made up of 4 particles, red, green, and blue, and white. The red and green and blue works very nice, about 600 nits, 700 nits. And beyond that, they don't have any more energy. And then the white pixel comes along and enhances the video to 1,000, 1,500 nits. But notice that the higher is the brightness, the less saturated the colors are. Therefore, you lose saturation of colors at high brightness. That's a characteristic of the white OLED technology. The QD OLED, or blue OLED, is I'm going to show you a diagram in a minute, allows for the whole volume of colors, all the way to the very top brightness. There is a little bit of desaturation at very low lights. Therefore, it's not totally perfect. And this is the shape of the pixel. It has a blue light source that goes straight, and we have quantum dots on top of each pixel. The quantum dots are energized by that energy of the blue light, and then we have red light, green light, blue light. Very close in performance to the old RGB OLED that we used to have, okay? Depending on the size of the molecules of the quantum dot, you can tweak the wavelength of that light. If you are very small, you are more blue. If you are a very big molecule, you are more red, okay? Then we have tweaked that quantum dot so that, remember that the more spiky the wavelengths of the red, green, and blue, the wider is the color gamut that you get. Therefore, in this model, the A95L that is currently available, we have expanded the red and the green in order to make the color gamut very, very wide. It's about 90% of 2020 color gamut, okay? Therefore, it produces spectacular color. Another characteristic of the QD OLED of the A95L is because since we don't have filters, you have a strong energy diffusion in the front, but not so much on the lateral. The viewing angle of the A95L of the QD OLED is much wider than the conventional white OLED because you have more energy going on in the sideways. Therefore, we have probably 50% less deviation of color saturation on the viewing angles, and the front emission of light is about 80% higher than the white OLED. Therefore, QD OLED is a good thing, and this is why this was selected for the flagship model that we have in consumer. We have two classes. The consumer is XR, is called XR. You can get them in 55-inch, 65, and 77-inch. Now, we took that technology and we make a professional version or a business-to-business version called FWD. Then we also sell a more professional version of that panel, that display, for applications such as viewing, client viewing, confidence monitors, editing rooms. And the difference between the consumer and the professional version is that, remember, in professional applications, colorists do not want dimming of the panel. OLED requires ABLs, automatic dimming, because OLED can burn very easily. If you leave a graphics on that display for 3 hours, 5 hours, you're gonna burn that signal. Therefore, in the FWD version, we disconnected the auto dimming so that the brightness stays put. But we put a disclaimer in the box. Hey guys, if you leave something there for 6 hours, it's your nickel. You burn the image, okay? All right, and of course, in the professional mode, we match everything else in the professional display. All right, that's the portion of the talk on display technology. I'm gonna switch to a slightly different topic, which is how to use HDR in live production. Once again, I emphasize live. This is not movie color grading. This is sports events, documentaries, anything that's live production. As you know very well now, HDR requires higher luminance, new gammas for conversion, and wider color gamut. There are two gammas, let me use the word gammas, but these are not the correct words. I'm gonna tell you the correct word in a minute. Two standards, one is the PQ, standardized as SMT2084, and HLG, hybrid low gamma, created by NHK and the BBC. And here you see an example. The vertical axis is 10 bits, the horizontal axis is about 1300 nits. Then this is the 709 curve, this is the hybrid low gamma, and this is the PQ. Of course, we have S-Log3. S-Log3 is another kind of gamma for high dynamic range, but it's not standardized. This is a Sony proprietary, but it's very popular in production. But once again, it's not simply how you handle the luminance, it's how you now map a much wider color gamut in order to create a completely different experience, visual experience. It's a volume of colors that you haven't seen before. Therefore, from 709, we moved to P3, and now we are beyond P3, going as much as possible close to 2020 color gamut. Nomenclature, terminology. What the transfer function that converts light into electricity, that usually we call it gamma, is called OETF, optical to electrical transfer function. Okay, usually happens in the camera or at the moment of producing that video. The EOTF, electro to optical transfer function, is once the master of that movie is processed, you're gonna feed it into the display. The display now has an EOTF. You're gonna go into the menu and you select 709, HLG, PQ. But there's another very important new thing, a new transfer function, is OOTF, optical to optical transfer function. Since we cannot really present reality in a display, there's going to be some differences, not only in brightness, but perhaps in the look of that image. Then the optical to optical transfer function includes also the creative intent of the production. Therefore, is the overall concatenation of all the process that makes the display different than the origination of the movie or the video signal. You have seen this for many years. You have your light, you have your camera, you put the OETF in the camera, you get your OOTF is in the display, and you see your display light. The convex is the gamma, which used to be 2.4, now is something different. And inside the display, whether it's a consumer display or a professional display, we cancel that concave by inverse gamma, and we put the look. Therefore, Dolby Vision has its look, HLG has its look. The producer of the video will have something to say. And then you get a light representation that is different to the linear light that you're capturing. Okay, these 4 documents, if you have the time, download them from the internet and memorize them. These are the Bible of HDR. The original definition of the UHD parameters. This is document, this is our ITU, International Telecommunication Union. Recommendation 2020, recommendation 2100 describes the HLG and the PQ. 2408 is the operational guidelines for practitioners, how to do HDR. And 2390 is colorimetry. And those 4 documents are the Bible of today's media production. Okay, in the 2100, because PQ and HLG behave differently, and I'll tell you why in a minute, the look of the PQ is placed in the display that is used for mastering. It's a display refer look. The look of the HLG is placed on the display at the receiving end, not in the origination. Therefore, each one of these 2 standards behave differently, but ultimately produce HDR. Okay, okay. This is PQ. This is the OETF of the PQ curve, and this is the mathematical curve. This is how HLG was created. This is the gamma 2.4 that we have in normal 709. And people say, well, it doesn't give me too much highlight. Let me use a log camera, a log curve. Then I'm going to take the best of both curves, the best of 709, the best of log, and I create a hybrid log gamma curve. And this curve is what is now used especially for live production. Then in loose terms, PQ is for non-real-time applications, for color grading, movie production. HLG is for live production. Okay. Again, very different behavior. HLG is called scene refer. HLG, the role of HLG is relative. It tries to copy what the camera is seeing and bringing that signal into my display. PQ is the movie director in front of the display, making decisions how that movie is going to look like. It's display refer, it's not scene refer. This is very important, very, very important. What is the range, the dynamic range of this curve? Well, the human visual system is approximately 30 stops in dynamic range, but at any given point in visual adaptation, we are about 14 stops, because your iris opens and closes depending on whether you are in a dark environment, you are in the beach. The hybrid log gamma allows you for about 17 stops. That's the range that HLG can process. And it's relative brightness. Let me explain. Let's say you're in a truck shooting a baseball game, and you have a little monitor in the truck, 600 nits. Well, you are watching your HLG, making your decisions on camera shading in that little display. And you produce digits, your digital representation. Black is 64, nominal white is 940, 10 bits. Okay? Maybe another person in another part of the studio is now using a bigger display, 1000 nits. Or you may be shooting in a big display, in a big projector, 2000 nits. But each one of them are processing HLG in a relative fashion. all of them are producing black 64, nominal white 940, because the gamma stretches according to the brightness of that display. You take that video and you now present it in your home. You may have a lousy TV set or a fancy TV set. The gamma scales up. You don't need special metadata to tell your display what to do. Okay, PQ. PQ is more powerful. It has about 24 stops of dynamic range, very rich. But once again, it is display refer. Every code value of that 10-bit word or 12-bit word has a specific value of luminance, very precise. Okay, then if I'm producing my movie watching at 600 nits, I'm going to have a set of codes, which are very different than if I was watching 1,000 nits display or 2,000 nits. Therefore, that range of code is now different because it depends on the display that you're using for mastering. Okay, how then you tell the receiving end what master monitor you were using? You need dynamic remapping using dynamic metadata. And this is what HDR10, which is what you get in OTT, on Netflix, Amazon, is static metadata. Dolby Vision is dynamic metadata. But you have to take those code values and massage them to map the display that you are using, because it's absolute. PQ is an absolute value. And you take a PQ signal and you put it into an SDR monitor, it looks washed out. If you put it in a proper PQ monitor, it looks nice. You take an HLG video, you put it into an SDR monitor, it looks okay, not too fancy, because HLG has a part of the S709 in the beginning. Okay, and these are the Sony curves that are mostly used in cinematography. And by the way, Europe uses a lot of S-Log3 in sports production, but for some reason, not so much here in North America. Okay, what are the challenges, or at least they used to be challenges, of HDR production in broadcasting? There are two documents. One is the 2408, which is a operational guidelines for broadcasting in English. And we have the same one in Japanese and Chinese for the Asian countries. And some of the challenges are, for example, where is white? How do you define white in a high dynamic range environment? I know peak white is 100 nits in SDR, but where is white in HDR? Is it 400? Is it 500? Where is it? Well, it has been some sort of consensus, and now around 200 nits is what we call nominal or reference white in high dynamic range. 100 nit continues to be peak white in SDR, but the value of nominal or reference white in HDR is now 203 nits. This document, I think there's another version, version 8, that came out this year, specifies the following. If you have a camera looking at a chart, a chip chart, a grayscale chart with 90% reflection, that value will be 73 IRE units in your waveform monitor, and that will 73 with a brightness of 179 nits in a monitor of 1,000 nits. Graphic white, anything that's 100% IRE, will be 203 nits. That's now legislated. I'm concentrated on HLG because I'm looking at real time. There are recommendations for code values and nit values for different types of skin colors. These are all guidelines. We also have values for S-Log3 for cinematography. Okay. Then notice that we always are using a 1000 nit reference monitor when you see these numbers. Then what do you do in a truck? Well, you take your grayscale chart, you take your camera, you point to the 90% reflection bar, and make sure that that number is 73 IRE units in HLG. And you vary the something called differential gain. The CCUs have an attenuation control that will bring down the SDR. You can imagine the CCU with two engines. When you turn them on, the two engines have the same amplification. If you were to open the iris a lot, the HDR will continue very beautifully, but the SDR will clip. Then we introduce an attenuation in the middle in order to open up the gap between the SDR and the HDR. Then you vary in the CCU, in the remote control of the camera, in order to make that SDR hitting 100 IRE units in SDR corresponds to 75 IRE units in HLG. You do that and forget about it. That your system is already set. You take your HDR into your video switches, you create your production, you are okay. But what about, I'm not only using cameras, I'm using graphics, I'm using legacy material, things that I have in archive. Well, those elements have to be mapped. Then anything that's 100 nit, I have to elevate to 203. I have my production, and once I have my HDR production, I have to down map to produce my SDR to send it over the airways. Therefore, this is called a round trip. I began SDR, go to HDR, come down to SDR. And you have to preserve that SDR, that round trip. Otherwise, your SDR is compromised. Okay? Okay, thank you. Then the issue in the production is, well, I have all these elements in my HDR production. Some of them are 200 nits, 300 nits, my highlight. Am I going to clip the highlight? I'm going to compress the highlight? That's the artistic intent of the production, to produce an SDR close to what you had in these cameras, in the CCUs, or close to what the movie director or the video producer wants. Okay, that is a basic background. Let me go a little bit more complicated here. Looks. Perhaps you have not thought about this, but we have looks in video. Traditional look is what we've had for now more than 60 years. This is the gammas are placed around red, green, and blue in the production equipment. The colors are saturated, are very punchy. This is why the grass is very, very green. The red helmets are very, very red. This is the traditional look. When HLG was standardized, there was some political, technopolitics in all this standardization. We created something called a natural look, where that punchiness, that very saturated colors were not necessary, some people said, because we are doing HDR. Therefore, the gamma was only placed around the luminance, which, yeah, you have your HDR signal, but the videos are more natural. This is where the name came from. It looks more like what you see in reality. Okay? Therefore, once again, the 709s, the SDR that we watch every night in our TVs is called traditional look. The HLG that we have in recommendation 2100 is the natural look. Sony's S-Log3 has the traditional look. Sony, well, because we knew we couldn't get really S-Log3 standardized because it's proprietary, we went along and we wanted to create HLG in the cameras. but we didn't want to abandon the punchiness, the look of the S-Log3. We created something called HLG Live, which is an HLG, mathematically correct, but it has this really color-saturated look. Therefore, Sony's HLG Live is a traditional look. Therefore, you won't be able to see it precisely, but you need a very fancy monitor to see it. But this is the traditional look. The HLG Live is high dynamic range, more saturated. HLG is slightly desaturated. It's called natural, okay? Let me bring it up. Traditional, especially look at the skin tones around the cheeks. You'll see different levels of saturation. This is the traditional look. Look at the red in the flags. This is HLG Live, brighter, more powerful, but maintaining the same level of saturation. And this is natural. Now, everything is a little bit less intense. Okay, therefore, some people were saying, well, Sony, I appreciate your life, but it's too much. Okay, then we introduced something called mild, which is a little bit in between, in between the natural and the live. And this is the differential gain between the HDR of the camera and the SDR at the output of the CCU. Then don't worry about those numbers. Okay. Then about 8 years ago, people started discussing, well, how do we convert SDR to HDR and vice versa? And new terminology, direct mapping. We take an SDR content and we put it into an HDR container. We're not gonna expand the highlight. We're just gonna put it into a different box. I'm gonna put it into my HLG or PQ box, but without altering the look of that SDR. Down mapping, okay? Now I have my HDR program. I'm going to drop it because I'm going to produce SDR. This is called down mapping or up mapping. Okay, let me put a picture. The picture is better. Therefore, direct mapping, up mapping is called inverse tone mapping or tone mapping. Then you're gonna read in magazines different tone mapping techniques used by NBC Universal, by Fox, by CBS, different ways of bringing the high dynamic range into your SDR for Monday Night Football, okay? All right, another twist. How do I convert? Do I really maintain the look of that display, of that content? How do I match an SDR camera to an HDR camera? Therefore, these two techniques appear in the technology. Scene refer is used for matching cameras. If you invested in a camera 15 years ago and you want to still use it in an HDR production, you use a scene refer technique. Oh, I have my Coca-Cola commercial of 5 years ago. I want to make it look exactly the same on my program today. Okay, I maintain that look, display refer. Let me show you pictures here. A look of SDR, I maintain it in my HLG display. This is display refer conversion. Or I may have a standard dynamic range camera that I'm going to mix with other cameras in high dynamic range. I'm gonna try to push it as much as possible to intercut between these two cameras. Okay. The problem with all this complexity is that in the round trip, if you go up one way, you have to come down exactly the same way. If you go up by scene refer, you better come down with scene refer. If you go up by display refer, you have to come down display refer. Otherwise, the resulting pictures are gonna be oversaturated or undersaturated. Okay. 8 years ago, almost 8 years ago, first guideline came out, and Sony had a lot to do with it. We had our production environment, and everyone, Sony was using Scene Refer. This is why our equipment has SR Live, Scene Refer Live. Every conversion, up and down, was Scene Refer. Very simple to use. The operators didn't have to worry about the different technologies for conversion, up conversion, down conversion, whether you're using servers, archiving material, everything was fairly straightforward, and people were happy. We did the World Cup, Wimbledon, the number of things. And the operational behavior of the production was very common. There was no complexity. A single HDR truck was able to do SDR and HDR simultaneously. But those were the good days. And then fast forward the number of years, and people start saying, well, I have news for you. We may want to convert graphics one way. We may want to convert cameras a different way. And if I have my master production in HDR, I may want to get an SDR that looks like that. Let me use display refer. And people started mixing the techniques. And then the operators and the trucks said, well, where do I use what? And it was very complex. And people, and to this day, we get calls from ESPN, from NEP, my video doesn't look right because they are mixing incorrectly the conversions. Then this combination produces what we call side effects. I'm going to show you some of these side effects. Okay, I have an SDR camera that needs to go up. I need a graphics that need to go up. I have high dynamic range people that go straight into the production switcher. Fine. In my down conversion, and by the way, if we were in a world where everything is HDR, no problem, because HDR has a lot of latitude. There will be no one will see effect. The problem is, because we have to make a living selling SDR, is that down conversion that if you damage, you create problems. And then this is the question that a lot of people are saying. Then what's happening if I have a graphics that goes up one way and comes down a different way? I go up by scene refer, go down by display refer, my pictures are desaturated. I go up by display refer, come down by scene refer, my pictures are oversaturated. Then let me show you a bigger. Let's say I have my camera. My camera is SDR, and I go up to HLG, because remember, HLG is the default HDR curve for sports, for live. Okay, if I go scene refer into HLG natural, HLG wins, the saturated picture. Now I go down by display refer to SDR, I'm going to inherit the look of HLG. Then my video now is desaturated. And somebody will tell the technical director, what's wrong with your program? It doesn't match the output of the cameras. Another one, okay, I have my graphics already shot. SDR, Coca-Cola, national car, and now you map that commercial into your HDR program in display refer because you want to maintain the look. And then now you down convert to give it to another broadcast station using scene refer. Your pictures are oversaturated. Therefore, the round trip is broken. There is a side effect. Then this is where Sony came in a number of years ago, and we were recommending HLG Live or Mile. And the result, you'll see in a minute, produces very, very close result of the original SDR. Then the round trip is okay. Therefore, we can, in Europe, if you're doing your soccer game, your basketball game, people are using HLG Live. In the US, people are now using HLG mile. Therefore, in a very straightforward way, and we are giving away lookup tables, it's very easy to produce now HDR. You don't need additional hardware, just simply lookup tables to up and down convert. Okay? Therefore, once again, live, mile, and natural. And our equipment, the Sony cameras that are almost de facto in live production, now you go into the CCU and you will see OETF. Oh, I'm gonna make my movie, my baseball game in HLG or in S-Log3. And then you decide the look. I want it live, very punchy. You want it mild, a little bit less saturated. Or you may decide, no, I'm gonna go natural. Okay, the monitors, well, the monitor you set it to HLG or to S-Log3. That's it. You don't have to worry about anything else. The mathematics work out. And now, what about lookup tables? The hardware that Sony introduced a number of years ago, fantastic, very accurate, but very difficult to operate. You really need to be a camera operator to very accurate. I think we sold a lot of them to Canada and Europe, but the rest in North America, we didn't sell that many units. But it was very dynamic, very accurate. People prefer to have a lookup table that you can put into an Aya box, for example. But what are the pluses and minuses of this approach? For precision, the hardware and signal processing is the best, but you need know-how by humans. You need to be a good operator. 3D lot, well, 3D lot, you make a recipe, you cannot change the recipe. You make a lot for daylight shooting, you cannot use that lot in night light shooting, and vice versa. Therefore, it's a static looks. And round trips are becoming more pronounced in lookup table. Once again, if what I said, if the lookup tables are designed for specific lighting conditions, you cannot use them in another environment. You have to maintain the look. Okay. Okay. If you go into the Sony website, you can download a number of lookup tables that Sony is giving for free. You can put them into any of the 4A, AJA converters, Teranex, to help this process. We have more lookup tables that give you better creative intent flexibility and so on. Just to conclude, our cameras, when you buy a Sony camera, a studio camera, the CCU now comes with 16 storage places, and 7 of those places are preloaded with lookup tables. Then 4 of them are for most sports. 2 of them are for cinema, because now studio cameras are used also in movie production. You may want to use them, you may erase them and put your own look. Okay? That's now available in the CCUs. And with that, I'm gonna conclude the presentation and I'm gonna show you some pictures. Feel free to come, grab your chair, because you need to see the pictures I'm gonna make some comments on what you see. Then feel free to come forward and, yeah. All right, this is a clip that shows a high luminance capability of this monitor. This is the 3110. This is the smaller version, okay? That sun is 4,000 nits. No, let it run, let it run. Look at the reflections in the water. If I were to present this in 1,000 nits,
Blurry? No.
It will clip, and you get a blob. And then the colorist would think, well, my movie is wrong, and I push my movie down. But there's nothing wrong with the movie, it's that the display could not show. Okay? Right. That 4,000 nits. You see a lot of texture and details in the water. And highlights can be in color as well. These are about 2,000, 3,000 nits. That's 4,000 nits. Then the color volume goes all the way from black to 4,000 nits, and it's maintained. If we were clipping any of these squares, we'll be limiting that RGB channel. That's 0 nits. Remember, this is a dual cell. This is not an OLED display. Then we can get precisely 0 nits of brightness. Hmm? Yes. Now, very, very important. We had a presentation in the Sony DMPC a few days ago. The QD OLED and other technologies can show very beautiful pictures in high luminance. What did you do? You killed my picture. Yeah. No, well, no, don't touch that.
Yeah, the power went off. I didn't touch it.
No. Oh, fuck. Well, trying to find the red. Well, let me explain. In QD OLED, once the luminance of the picture begins to diminish, the color desaturates. And we were using that rose that I'm going to show you. And that rose in very low brightness becomes black and white because you lose the chroma. In this technology, the chroma remains intact. No, okay, let's put the alpha.
Well, and the power consumption changes. If you're running 4,000, takes more power.
No.
Constant power?
No, I'm going to explain that.
What did it do?
And the other cable, the blue one. No. Yeah. Put it in one. No. We ran out of power. We lost power.
Okay, hold on a second. Fucking power.
Yeah,
Piece of
that's it.
shit.
Yeah, go ahead.
No power strip.
Yeah. Okay. This is a movie that was shot about 6 years ago at 4,000 nits.
Everything working? Yep.
You see, it's a very difficult scene, very low light. In a QD OLED environment, the blacks will be crushed. You won't be able to see the tonality in the shadows. Therefore, this is why we're saying QD OLED is fine for client viewing, but not for mastering. Also, you cannot see it here, but this area is about 1,500 nits. If you place this into a QD OLED, whether it's Sony or Flanders or anybody else, because it's not white, it's a bluish, the green channel gets clipped first, and only the red and the blue will go through. You'll see a big patch of pink. Then the colorist will say, wow, let me push the movie down. And it's not necessary. The movie is okay. It's just the display doesn't have the...
But then you're color correcting stuff that the viewer can never watch. So if you're not aware of the end display, that's kind of the problem with, true RGB, LCD or OLED, and then you go to a white RGB OLED and it desaturates. So, but the majority of people have OLED have LG-based displays as opposed to the new QD OLED. So the poor colorist doesn't know what the shit they're doing.
People are changing.
They don't know what what do they look at? Do they look at the end product or they look at it's perfect? And we were talking earlier, the fact that there's no standards. So, one streaming service is doing stuff at 1,000 nits and another's doing it at 400, and you change programs and you really almost have to set up your TV set.
Another critical picture. This picture is very, very bright. It's about 2,500 nits. You place this into a QD OLED or a plain vanilla OLED, because they have ABL, the video becomes gray automatically. And consumer displays don't have a light that's telling you that the ABL is functioning. You just see a gray picture. And the colorist doesn't know any better. But also, this is as 1,000 nits, 4,000 nits. All right. Any comments, questions?
Can't hear the question.
Yeah, use the microphone.
Hello there. I'm just thinking that you would still be mastering at the best quality, even if some consumer display of this era cannot reproduce it properly. It would still have, shall we say, archival value, right? You don't have to remaster for some future display. Am I missing the point? You would have.
But you see, we had a discussion with Disney and Claudio Miranda, and right now a lot of the consumer displays, 2024, 2025, are now hitting 3,000 nits.
Yeah,
A lot of consumers are now moving up. A lot of folks are saying, well, if I grade my movie at 1,000, it's gonna look strange.
Yeah, but what do you think the most common, 10% window, what do you think most HDR displays are in the home today? 400, 500, or no, 200 or 300 at 10% window?
200, 300. 200, 300. Most displays will do 1,000 in 2%.
Yeah.
Not 10%.
It's a far cry from when we were at 30-foot Lamberts and standard def and HD, earlier HD.
Yeah.
It did translate. We should all have pictures like this at home, so.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Let me give you the microphone so people, no, but people at home, come on.
You were talking about the two network connections and a failover, red and blue. My question would be, is it actually a failover or does it do a true 2021, 22-7?
22-7.
It does a dash 7, okay.
Anything else? We'll leave the lights down. You can come up close up and look at some other pictures.
Do I have
So
to type out a
thank you for
question
coming
or
to
can I
this
say a
October.
question?
We'll see you next month.
You're a colorist, you're changing colors, you're making a format, but you started off with more bandwidth and then electrum and everything else. But one thing is always. What technology is A95L? Quantum dot.
Joe, clearly there's an advantage to being there.
Yeah. I'm sitting here looking at the image from on site there, and of course, talk about EOTFs and everything. Not only is the camera probably SD that we're watching, but our displays, also computer monitors.
Well, and then let's go ahead and give a nod to Zoom as well. They're smacking the hell out of this signal on its way to and from.
Well, there you go too. Yeah. And now look at that. No
There we
signal.
go. Yeah. So this means they've gone to the bar.
Probably.
Yeah, I know.
I was just wondering if we're going to have a chance to do this, what they call in one of my other meetings I go to, they call it the afterglow meeting.
Oh, there you go.
That's the Hollywood Sapphire Group. We'll go usually sometimes for 2 hours after the meeting in the afterglow like this, just chatting about stuff.
Well, and that's where a lot of stuff gets understood. I mean, can you see the questions I asked there on your screen?
I did. Is that you? Oh, yeah. I saw that.
Yeah.
Is the data encapsulated somewhere in the video signal or separate data channel? Was that you? Yeah.
What prompts that question is because of my longtime station experience, the engineers at TV stations are asked to fix stuff.